All right. Good afternoon. I'm going to adjust this camera just a little bit. Yes. All right. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. You all know who I am. I'm Dr. Maisha, founder of the Mind ReMapping Academy. And, you know, it's interesting. There's always the things, like to do my live nuggets every Tuesday, generally speaking, every Tuesday if I'm not in training or on spring break, which is coming up in a couple of weeks, or on vacation. But generally speaking, there are the things that I plan to speak about, and then there are the things that I actually speak about. So um, today, I was going to start to have the conversation of values, and I love values. Values are what drive us, or what's important to us, or what motivate us. And then I was having a conversation. I've had two conversations, and I decided that um, because of these conversations, I talk about the difference between the goals that we set and we achieve, and the goals that we don't. Um, and what and I want to talk about this in the context of my TEDx journey, because I've had several people who I've had conversations with. They're like, "Tell me what it was like. Tell me what you learned, how you grew." And so I'll talk a little bit about that. But I want to talk a little bit about this process, this thing we call setting of goals. Some people call it attraction of goals, or manifestation. Some people call it SMART goals. There are lots of names that people call when they put something in their future that they want to achieve and actually have it happen. So I'm going to talk about it in the context of setting goals. And there really is a difference in the process of the goals that you achieve and the goals that you don't. And it's simpler than most people think. Last week I talked about the discomfort being necessary for growth, and and the fact that you go through these four stages of learning. We talked about unconscious incompetence, conscious incompetence, conscious competence, and unconscious competence. And when we're in this process of putting goals in our future, this also comes into play, particularly the discomfort of being attached to how the goal is going to happen. So, I'm going to talk about this in the context of my journey toward TEDx. I have been wanting to be on the TEDx stage, to do a TEDx talk for at least a decade. I've now retired from clinical medicine, and I primarily do my work either in my trainings, my trainings in NLP and hypnosis, my certification trainings that I teach, or and in organizations through the diversity, equity, inclusion teaching, really deepening, going beyond the bias conversation and looking at bridging that gap between when you learn about bias and then what to do with it afterwards. And I also do work with my partner, Dr. Joe Weiner, with conscious anti-racism. So I've sort of moved beyond that clinical medicine, but I have wanted to be on the TED stage since I had my own practice, since I had my own integrative medicine practice. And what I'll say is that I think that for me, I always thought that maybe my idea wasn't big enough. Maybe it wasn't impactful enough. Maybe there's all those enough conversations that kept happening in my mind. And it wasn't until maybe a few years ago that I really got serious about putting in applications. And I put those applications in, and I didn't hear back from people. And I think in the process of setting goals, number one, you really have to have the grit of taking the action and being willing to receive no response or negative response. Now, even then, though, I wasn't putting the goal in my future in the way that I could be putting in my future, right? So I was doing the applications. I was, sort of like on and off. I wasn't consistent with it. And not surprisingly so, I never landed that TEDx talk. But the beginning of 2021, I did a particular process that I'm going to share with you a little bit later in this conversation. I did a particular process that really put me at the source of this manifestation, if you will, of this goal, having it really actually happen. And it's a process I teach in my trainings, and it's a process that I do with my students. I see the progress. Oh, thank you. The process. Yes, the process is coming. um, it's a process that I do with my clients. It's a process that I teach my students, and it is a very powerful process of putting a goal into the future. And there's a way that you state it. There's a way that you do this process, and I'm going to kind of go over that in a bit. But what happened was, I had to become detached from the how it was going to happen. I had to become attached for the how this goal was going to be achieved. Such is the case with many of the goals that I've set. I've set goals for my businesses when I had my private practice. I've set goals for my private practice. I've set when I actually set a goal to sell my private practice using this process, and it happened. I set a goal for building my first coaching practice outside of clinical medicine using this process. But the thing that sometimes we do is when we set goals, we get attached to how that goal is supposed to, what is the exact way that that goal is supposed to happen. And contrary to our usual beliefs, sometimes it's best to let go of that attachment. Now, yes, you can have a structure for action, and I think it's necessary to have a structure for action whenever you set a goal. I mean, that's a requisite for change. It's a requisite, focusing on what you want and um, focusing on the structure, the actions that you're taking. But there's a difference between having a structure, like an outline of structure, the bones, the framework structure, and being attached to the exact way it's supposed to happen. There is a difference between the two. And we want to begin to distinguish that in ourselves. Like, when am I becoming too attached to the process or to the happening itself, rather than what my good friend Dr. Andre Leroy would say, the allowing based on the structure. So you put the structure in place, you take the action, and then you allow the opportunities to come, the pathways to arise that allow you to move along that pathway to that goal in the time that you are stating that it is to happen. So, was an interesting thing that, I placed this goal in my future back in January of actually, it was more like December of 2020, because I think I shared with you just before these holidays that this is a process that I go through of putting goals in my future, of visioning, of creating my year. And so in December is when I do that very specific process of putting things in my future. And so in December of 2020, I put in my future that I would have landed a TEDx talk by the end of 2021. Now we know that it's 2022 now, but that process of having been accepted into the TED process happened right inside of that time frame. And the first half of the year, I wasn't taking any action toward that. But then one of my students, who graduated from my NLP Mind ReMapping practitioner training, came to me after the training and said, guess what? I put this in my future and I got this TED Talk. And right then, that's when it clicked for me. It's time. There was a little voice in my head that says, it's time. And that's when I knew that the pathway was being lined up. And from there, she connected me with my coach, Cesar Cervantes, and I got into the program, and I started to really get the structure for applying to this talk. And I applied to probably at least 10, maybe a few more of these TED events before I got accepted. And I did get into second round interviews for a couple of them. But then I finally, in November, was notified, actually during one of my practitioner trainings, that I had gotten this TEDx talk. So now from there, there was this goal of achieved of having gotten a TEDx talk. The next thing that I needed to put into my future was that the talk would go exactly the way I envisioned. And I had to really have a picture of that. I really had to have this vision of what it would be like to step on that red rug in front of these people and deliver whatever talk I was going to deliver in the way that I wanted to deliver it, and leave an impact that would leave people inspired. And I had to have a vision of that, a picture of that in place. And when I had that picture in place, then there were all of the things that I needed to do, the structures that I needed to put in place, that I need to organize in my mind, in my conscious and unconscious mind, to have that actually happen. Okay. And so, did that process take some immeasurable stretching? Absolutely, it did. In fact, I believe that this process probably consumed most of my world. For those of you who know me personally, um, I went a little silent towards the end. Sort of consumed me for a moment between that and momming and doing two trainings, my practitioner, my most recent master practitioner training, and then, setting up for the upcoming training in April, really got, you know, consumed in the process. Now, a couple of things that I really got for myself was that I need to, whenever this type of things happen, I need to be very mindful of my self-care. And I'm not going to get too far on a tangent with that, but it needs to be mentioned that when we put goals in our future, and we're really focusing on like achieving this thing and achieving that thing, we want to remind ourselves and remember to take care of ourselves along the process, because when things get very stressful, then that's when sometimes we tend to back off on our self-care, when it's actually time to lean into our self-care. But I had these structures in place, and lo and behold, on um, the day of, people ask, "Were you nervous?" I think I had prepared so much, and I had envisioned the moment so deeply that by the time I stepped on the stage, it was inevitable that it was going to go the way I had said it was going to go, and it did. Um, so let me talk about this process of putting this goal into the future and having it show up in a way that really that it can actually happen the way you vision it to happen. And so the first thing, and you've heard me talk about this even in talking about this process, is to have the goal be very clear. And what does that even look like? Have it to be very clear, because sometimes our goals are very nebulous. And when our goals are nebulous, the outcomes that we produce, or the outcomes that show up, end up being nebulous. The pathway can't be clear. You see, the conscious mind is the goal setter, we say, and the unconscious mind is the goal getter. So if you do not give clear vision and instruction to your unconscious mind in what it needs to look for to create that pathway, then you'll get muddy results. So the goal needs to be clear. Now, what that means is we use the SMART goal framework: specific, measurable, and meaningful to you. So the goal definitely needs to be meaningful to you. Um, Achievable and action oriented, right? So passive, passive oriented goals are less likely to be achieved than action oriented goals. What is it that you want to attract, but where's the action in that goal that you want to attract? And then, of course, realistic and responsible. So that's the R, SMART, and timed and toward. This is important to put a time on it, but also to make it the goal, state the goal toward what you want as opposed to toward what you don't want, which is actually away from what you want. So you are away from what you don't want, excuse me. The reason we say it needs to be toward is because if you're focused on the thing that you're moving away from, And the unconscious mind doesn't necessarily recognize the negative, it only recognizes the thing that you say itself. Then what you focus on is what you're going to produce. So if you're focused on the thing that you're moving away from, you're going to produce more of that thing. So it needs to be stated specifically toward what you want. And specifically, again, if the goal is non-specific, like I want more of something, or you have this sort of very general goal, then the unconscious mind cannot pinpoint what specific opportunities it needs to be looking for to get that very specific goal. So if you want to, let's say if you want to land a TEDx talk, that's a very specific goal. If you want to achieve a different job, I actually just did a process with with one of my clients this past week, where we put this very specific job description that she wanted in her future and the parameters around that. And so you want to be as specific as possible with the goal. And then when you state the goal, usually I add or better, or better. So what that does is it makes it very specific, but it opens the door for something bigger and better to happen if that's what the universe has planned, so to speak. So that specificity is very key. I think that's probably one of the specificity and the toward in time are the two most important, and the measurable. Like, how will you know? How will you know that you got that goal? How will you know? What will be in place? Those are the three most important things, I think, in that SMART goal process. So then what you want to do is, once you've gotten the goal and it's very specific, then you state it as if the now, right? You want to step into a vision of that. So you want to state that goal as if it's right now. It is now, this date, and I am, and the goal. The very specific, measurable, action oriented. What are you doing? What are you doing, seeing, hearing, feeling when that goal is in place? And making sure that it's meaningful and it's toward what you want. Why does it need to be meaningful to you? Why does it need to be meaningful to you? Because when you want to be able to get the positive kinesthetic when you're putting this goal into the future, what do I mean when I say positive kinesthetic? That positive feeling in your body. If you set a goal, and actually this is interesting because in my master practitioner training, I was talking with one of my students, and when we were doing this process, they were doing their breakthrough sessions, and she was saying how when she had done this work before with another practitioner, one of the reasons that she thinks it didn't happen was because when the practitioner, and this is a role, if you're a practitioner, if you're a coach, if you're a fellow NLP practitioner, you know this already, but when you're having your client set goals, it's important for them to set the goal and not for you to embellish or suggest the goal. Because, and this is again why meaningful to you is very important. Because if the goal is not meaningful to the person, then they're not going to get the most positive, real feeling about that goal, which is one of the things that is key for the unconscious mind to be able to bring up the vision and to be able to put that in our future. So you want to make sure that the goal is meaningful to you, not meaningful to someone else. It's so important. The second thing is responsible. Why does it need to be? What does that even mean? It needs to be responsible. We talk about ecology, which is what is the impact. If the impact of the goal on your life is not aligned with your values, if the impact of that goal on the life of your family is not aligned with your values, meaning what's important to you, or if it violates a value, another value, if it's in conflict with another value. We're going to talk about that over the next coming weeks. We're going to talk about values. We're going to talk about conflicting values, which is one of the reasons why sometimes we don't achieve the goals that we set. Sometimes we have goals that we set, and those goals conflict with other values in our lives. And when they do, it blocks us from getting that most positive, real feeling about that goal. And when that happens, then it sends more confusion to the unconscious mind. So that most positive, that responsible piece is looking at what's the impact on you, what's the impact on your immediate family, people around you, what's the impact on your community, society, the world, and global. It's just a check-in, right? And when you check in about that, and you are clear that the impact is aligned with other values, there's no conflicting values with this goal, then you have a goal that's responsible or ecological. So we've talked about specific and measurable and meaningful to you, action oriented, and realistic and responsible, achievable, and then toward and timed. So now you get the last step. What is the very last thing that need to um, you need to know, or you need to see, or needs to happen to let you know that you've gotten that goal? And you actually bring, when you think about that, you have a picture. You have some type of visual, auditory, kinesthetic representation about that goal. The very last step to let you know that you've gotten it. And then you want to step into that, like you're in your body, looking through your own eyes at that moment when you know that you got that goal, and see what you see, hear what you hear, and feel the feelings of actually getting that goal. Then once you've done that, then you're actually going to take that, you're going to step out, and I'm going to give you part of this process, right? But there's a little bit more to it, and I'm going to give you like an overview of it. Then you actually, once you've done that, you've sort of adjusted it and you get the most real feeling, then what you're going to do is you step out of that picture, like you kind of like have this vision where you can see yourself in the picture. You can see all of the things that last step happening. You can see that, and then you take that and you put that into your future timeline, into the date, the exact date that you have declared. Now, this is also important when we talk about time. Some people say by January, by February, by March. Well, remember specificity. If you say by January, well, it could be January 2023, January 2024, January 2025, January 2050. If you say January 31st, what year is it? If you say, March, is it March 1st or March 31st? So in order to do this process, you also need to be very specific with the date. So not only do you need to be specific with the goal, you need to be specific with the date, with the date. All right. And so when you go and you imagine yourself going into the future, you imagine yourself floating into the future and putting this visual, this representation, you will have a very specific date in which to put it, like it fits into a puzzle, like a perfect puzzle piece fitting into your future. And then when you do that, you can actually turn and notice that the events between that time and the now reorganize themselves for the successful accomplishment of that goal. So why is this important? Because what it does is it gives your unconscious mind a framework for, oh, okay, like you've put this goal in the future, and then you've gone back and you can actually visualize all the things that need to happen. It's like reverse engineering the success of the goal. You can now turn and see all of the things that need to happen in order for you to achieve that goal. It gives your unconscious mind kind of a structure, a very loose one, but a structure to be able to look out for the opportunities. Remember, I said the conscious mind, we say the conscious mind's a goal setter and the unconscious mind's a goal getter. Now that you've put this goal in your future and you've turned and you've seen the events reorganize themselves to have the successful accomplishment of that goal, then your unconscious mind has a framework to go by. And it can listen for in a different way, look for in a different way, opportunities that will lead you in that direction. So this is the difference between setting a goal that may or may not happen and setting a goal that is like sure to happen. This process. And in order to do this process, one of the key components is removing the doubt and being certain that this goal can actually happen. Because when we allow doubt into this process, then we insert doubt into our future. So you may say, well, I do visualizations all the time. I do affirmations and visualization all the time. But the question is, what is your level of certainty that this will happen? Because if you are putting a vision in your future, but you have that internal doubt about it, whether it's self-doubt or doubt of that it can happen, that the thing could happen, or doubt about the date, or doubt about anything, it's like interference for the unconscious mind. It's like interference and distortion. So you want to make sure that when you're putting this goal in your future, that there's that 100% kinesthetic certainty, that feeling of certainty that, yeah, this thing is happening. This is doable. This is workable. I can do this. I have the resources. I have the capacity, right, to do this. So these are some very important um, um, concepts. That's not the word I really want to use, um, but that's the word I'm going to use until I think of the word that I actually want to use. But these are some very important food for thought, things to think about when putting goals in your future. Most people, the way they put goals in their future is they just set a goal and then they barrel forward to try to figure out how to make that goal happen. And that is, if you've read some of my most recent posts, especially the bending of the spoon post. If you've read the bending of the spoon post that I did, I think it was yesterday, I talk about the difference between force and power. And we often use brute force in achieving our goals. We're going to barrel forward. We're going to push forward. We're going to. And I think it's definitely useful to have grit, to have sustainability, to have that. But when you put goals in your future in this way that I just talked about, it opens up the allowing. It opens up the co-conspiracy of the universe with you, the co-conspiracy of your full self, your unconscious mind, rather than just using conscious force all the time to barrel through to those goals. And I think it's a very important principle. It's a very important principle. The other way people set goals is they set them and forget them. And if you set a goal, but you don't have a structure, the action, or you don't, put it in your future, then, well, what happens? The goal does get forgotten about. And, people set goals that are very general, very non-specific, very vague. Well, that doesn't work because then, well, you're not giving very specific direction to where you want to go. So this process brings a little bit more refined structure, very an excellence to the structure of setting goals that give you the opportunity to really manifest them. So I'm happy to have any questions for those who are either listening live or on replay. And I'll be checking the comments. So I encourage you to post your questions in the comment so that I can answer those questions. And what we'll be talking about next time will be values. Like, why are values so important? One of the things that I'm very clear about is that I think we underrepresent values in our lives, and especially in my profession as a physician, in my industry. I see when I used to work with specifically with moms in medicine on burnout. When I work with doctors now, one of the things that I do first is to look at what's important to you. What are your values? And not just like surface values, but really core, deep values. Because one of the other differences between the goals that you achieve and the goals that you don't happen to be whether or not they're aligned and in cohort and concert with your values. So we'll talk a little bit about why that matters next week. All right, so now that you know the process, I invite you to save this and share this and listen to it again. This will come out in audio podcast as well, so that you can begin to shift the way you put goals in your future. And like I said earlier, it does require you to manage, get rid of, eliminate all of the self doubt, the limiting decisions, limiting beliefs, limiting conversations that you have before you do this kind of goal setting. So you don't put negative self-talk, doubt, and limiting beliefs in your future. You want to put clear, powerful goals in the future. And if you feel like you have are having trouble getting rid of that self-doubt, having trouble getting rid of those limiting beliefs, conversations, the old negative emotions, if you're having trouble doing that on your own, then you can reach out to me, because this is what I do. And you can do that by sending me a message. You can go to mindremappingacademy.com. I'll put that in the links. You can, if you're with me on Instagram, you can click on the bio link. I think my link is also on YouTube as well, if you're listening live on YouTube. And of course, again, like I said, you can direct message me as well. Okay. So I look forward to hearing some of the goals. I would invite you to share some of the goals that you're going to be putting in your future, and would love to hear whether or not you achieve those goals. And again, next week we'll talk about values. Looking forward to it. You all have a wonderful rest of the day and a wonderful rest of the week. And oh, by the way, for those of you who are listening, they're like, I want to learn this process. I want to learn to do this process with others. If you're a coach, if you're a physician, if you're in a service-based industry and you work with people in this way, and you want to learn how to help people move beyond the boundaries of their mind, then you want to come to one of my trainings. And in order to do that, again, reach out to me. We have an April training and a September training coming up. Now, we have trainings beyond that, but I typically don't open them until we have, until the training before it is gone. So April 22nd through the 29th and September the 10th through the 16th are the upcoming NLP and mind remapping training. So if you are wanting to learn the things that I'm saying and learn to do them, not for only for yourself, but for the people in your life or for your clients, then reach out to me. Happy to train you. All right. And if you're an organization and you think this conversation of goal setting is valuable and you want me to come and do a goal setting workshop for your employees, your leaders, and among other things, you can reach out to me as well. Again, it's mindremappingacademy.com. All right, you guys have a wonderful rest of the day. I'll see you next week when we start talking about values and values alignment. That's going to be a series. I think it's going to come in about 4 parts. All right, take care. Namaste.